The Arizona desert in 1875 stretched like a silent expanse of desolation, a rugged land south of Silent Canyon where the dry wind stirred the tall grass and brittle brush along the canyon's edge, its ceaseless murmur weaving tales of survival, loss, and resilience amid the wild frontier. Silent Canyon, a remote ranch perched on the ridge trail above a restless river, stood weathered under a pale sky still clinging to the night's chill, its fences sagging under the weight of neglect, its barren fields whispering of a solitude unbroken for years. Elias Reed rode along the trail, one hand resting lightly on the reins of his mule-colored horse, the other hanging loosely at his side, his worn coat faded at the cuffs and stiff from the sun. At 43, his face was a rugged map of lines etched by war and grief, a faint scar along his jaw, a memento of a Union cavalry skirmish that had shattered his knee, leaving him with a burial flag and a hollow home after his wife and daughter succumbed to fever 8 winters past. His hat, battered and dust-caked, shaded gray eyes that carried a quiet stoicism, a cowboy alone by choice, preferring the silence to the company of men. He'd been out since dawn, as was his habit, checking the south fence line after a storm had ravaged the land 2 nights prior, the damp soil threatening to erode the posts he'd labored to replace. His knee ached with the cold, a persistent reminder of battles fought and lost, and the solitude of the canyon had become a refuge from a world that had taken everything. As he dismounted near a bend where the fence dipped close to the river, he frowned at the leaning post, his fingers digging into the soggy earth to assess the damage. The river had swollen beyond its banks, a sign of worse to come, when a splash broke the stillness, not the splash of fish or driftwood, but a heavy, human sound. His head snapped up, scanning the water, squinting against the glare. Movement caught his eye, a figure half submerged, twisting weakly in the current, an arm reaching out before vanishing again. Panic surged through him, a rare break in his calm. Without thought, he shed his coat and dove in, the river's cold stealing his breath, its current tugging at his injured leg. He pushed forward, arms cutting through the water, his knee screaming with each kick. She surfaced briefly ahead, a young face framed by black hair, her mouth open in a silent cry. 3 more strokes brought him to her, and he grabbed her waist, kicking hard to drag them to shore. She was barely conscious, her skin icy, lips pale, her soaked deerskin dress torn at the neckline, exposing the soft swell of her chest where her breath came in shallow gasps. Her feet were bare, scratched and bruised, a mark above her temple darkening with a bruise. Elias hauled them onto the bank, collapsing to his knees beside her, pulling her upright to support her back. She coughed, gagging up water, then went still, her dark brown eyes fluttering open, muddied with fear but alert. He studied her young, perhaps 24, Apache by her features, and his heart thumped, his hands trembling from the effort and the weight of the moment. He glanced downriver, expecting pursuit, family, a horse, a shout, but the canyon remained empty, save for the wind and water. "Where the hell did you come from?" he muttered, his breath ragged. She didn't answer, her strength spent. He couldn't leave her there, too cold and fragile to survive. His cabin, a half-mile uphill, offered blankets, firewood, and a bed. Ignoring the pain in his knee, he lifted her into his arms, one beneath her shoulders, the other under her knees, her head resting against his chest, her breath feathering weakly against his collar. She didn't resist, her eyes closing as he trudged up the slope, each step a test of his resolve. Past his anxious horse, through the trees, he reached the cabin, its cold chimney, a stark contrast to the warmth he'd soon kindle. Inside, he laid her gently on the bed, covering her with every blanket he owned, stripping off her moccasins to check for wounds. Her ankle was twisted but not broken, and he hesitated at her torn dress, draping his wool coat over her shoulders before turning to light the fire. Kneeling by the hearth, he struck a match, his hands still wet and unsteady, the flame catching slowly. Once it took, he stood and met her gaze. She was watching him, barely, her lips moving without sound. "You're safe," he said, his voice low and even. "You're all right now?" She blinked, a faint nod, and he pulled a chair to the far corner, sitting to guard her through the night, his jaw tight with the uncertainty of what he'd brought into his life. By dawn, the fire crackled steadily, its orange glow brushing the bed where she lay, her breathing steadied, color returning to her face. Elias hadn't slept, remaining in the chair, his damp shirt and aching knee a testament to the night's ordeal. She stirred, her fingers tightening on his coat, her eyes opening to meet his watchful, cautious, but not afraid. You understand me? He asked quietly. A pause, then a nod. You hurt anywhere? Another pause, and she touched her ankle, wincing. He crouched beside her, rewrapping it with a clean cloth, her eyes never leaving his face, her dignity unshaken despite her vulnerability. Name? He asked after a long moment. Kaya, she whispered, her accent hinting at Apache roots. He tapped his chest. Elias. She surveyed the cabin rough walls, sparse furniture, the rifle near the door, her gaze lingering on it. Safe here, he said, following her look. No one's coming. It was a hope, not a certainty, for a woman like her, alone in the river, likely carried a past that might follow. He stepped outside to tend his horse, needing space to process, the smoke rising steadily from the chimney a sign of life within. Inside, Kaya eased upright, her body aching from cold and bruises, the silence striking her as unfamiliar yet comforting. His coat smelled of smoke and leather, and she pulled it closer, studying the chair where he'd watched over her. When Elias returned with water and jerky, he found her sitting up, smoothing her dress, its torn neckline still exposing her chest. He handed her the cup, and she drank slowly, her eyes steady. Where's your family? He asked carefully. She looked away, her jaw tensing, shaking her head firmly. Tribe? Another pause, then, number. Her voice was clearer, her accent strong, and though he sensed withheld truth, he let it rest. For the rest of the day, they communicated in glances and gestures, him clearing space by the fire, her folding the blanket with care. Elias repaired the fence, his mind on the mystery of her arrival, while Kaya tended the fire, claiming a role with quiet purpose. That night, she stayed in his chair until he climbed into bed, then joined him, lying close but not touching, her warmth a new presence in his solitude. Neither spoke, but the silence had shifted, a bond forming in the ashes of their shared resilience. The Arizona desert unfurled like a relentless expanse of cracked earth and fading shadows as Elias Reed, Kaya, Liko, and the Apache kin ventured away from Silent Canyon, the pale dawn casting long, ghostly silhouettes across the arid terrain. Elias led the way on foot, his worn coat dusted with sand, his boots crunching through the brittle soil, his lasso coiled at his hip, his rifle slung across his back. His face, rugged with a scar along his jaw, bore a mixture of determination and unease, his gray eyes scanning the horizon for signs of the outlaws, a quiet resolve battling the weight of his past solitude. Kaya walked beside him, her torn deerskin dress fluttering beneath a borrowed blanket, her ankle still bandaged from the river, her small woven pouch with tribal secrets swaying at her side, her brown eyes sharp with survival. Liko, the 2-year-old boy, clung to her, his tattered rag doll pressed against his chest, his pale face showing signs of recovery. A young Apache warrior, Tala, followed, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his hands carrying a spear, his presence a silent guardian, flanked by 3 others from Kaya's tribe, their faces painted with earth tones, their horses laden with supplies glinting in the weak light. The journey to a hidden tribal refuge near Sunken Pass, a 2-day trek, was their goal, but the desert held other trials to test their fragile alliance. Their water was scarce, the canteen they'd salvaged from Silent Canyon reduced to a few tepid drops. Their supplies dwindled to a strip of jerky and a handful of desert figs Tala had foraged. The heat beat down, its intensity a relentless adversary, the silence broken only by the rasp of their breathing, the soft whimper of Liko, and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Elias's mind churned with the previous day's events, his impulsive rescue of Kaya, the arrival of the Apache kin with their claim of sacred law, the threat of outlaws. He'd saved her to ease his own guilt, but her presence now drew danger, a price he hadn't foreseen. He offered Kaya water, a gesture of goodwill, his hand trembling slightly from the heat. Kaya accepted, her eyes narrowing. Why risk this for me? She asked, her voice raw but steady. Elias met her gaze, his scar itching under the sun. Lost my wife and girl to fever. Can't leave you to die like that. Kaya's expression softened, but suspicion lingered, a reflection of a life shaped by rejection and survival. Tala and the warriors walked with a quiet dignity, their buckskin garments rustling softly, the woven pouch Kaya carried catching the fading light. Tala shared their story as they moved, his voice low and resonant. Outlaws raided our camp, stole our goods, killed many. Kaya fled with Liko to escape. We've tracked them since, fearing their return. Kaya added, her tone firm. My tribe cast me out. I ran to save my son. A warrior, Kono muttered. They want our tribal secrets. Elias's heart sank. The pouch likely held something valuable, a lure that had ruined men. But Kaya's life and Liko's safety were worth more. I'll keep you safe, he said, his resolve firming, though doubt gnawed at him about the pouch's contents. Their progress halted at midday when they reached a trading post tucked into a dry arroyo desert crossing, a haven for outlaws and wanderers. Elias needed supplies, his stores depleted after the tribe's arrival. But Kaya tensed. Danger here, she warned. Men talk. Elias nodded, his rifle ready. Inside, the air was stifling, the stench of sweat and stale tobacco thick. A trader named Silas Crow, a wiry man with a crooked grin, leaned against a crate, his eyes narrowing. Elias Reed, he said, heard you took in an Apache woman and her kid. Outlaws are offering a bounty. Elias's jaw tightened, his past with town rumors flashing. Mind your own, Silas. Crow smirked, his gaze on the pouch. $200 says I tell them where you're headed. Kaya's pouch flashed, striking Crow's arm, forcing him back. Speak, and you bleed, she hissed. Elias stepped forward, his rifle aimed. Walk away, Silas. This ain't your fight. Crow paled, retreating, his laughter echoing. They'll hunt you down. Elias cursed under his breath. Crow's treachery would lead the outlaws straight to Sunken Pass. We move now, he said. The tribe's respect grew, their trust a tentative thread. You're brave, Kono said. Elias shook his head, the weight of his past pressing down. I've been a loner. The ambush came at dusk. Hoofbeats thundered through the sand, and 4 outlaws led by a scar-faced rider named Vance surrounded them near a rocky outcrop. Hand over the woman, Reed. Vance barked, his rifle raised. Elias fired, his shot grazing Vance's arm, sending him staggering. Kaya threw a rock, striking another's shoulder, while Tala's spear felled a third. Elias's second shot dropped a rider, the outcrop falling silent save for the wind's moan. The 4th fled, shouting threats. They'll burn you out. They took cover behind the rocks, bandaging minor cuts, the heat seeping into their exhaustion. Tala's eyes met Elias's, his suspicion easing. You fight for us, he said. Elias wiped sweat from his brow, his scar itching. Ain't right, what they did. I've got regrets of my own. Kaya nodded, her pain surfacing. They killed my brother for this pouch. Elias's breath caught the relic was the key, a prize worth killing for. We'll keep it safe, he said, his resolve hardening. Their bond deepened as they rested, Elias sharing his canteen, Tala offering figs from his pouch. What's in that pouch? He asked. Kaya held it up, its symbols glowing faintly. It holds our sacred rites. They want them to sell. Elias's heart ached, his losses echoing hers. I lost my family to fever, lived alone since. Kono's gaze softened. We're all broken then. Maybe we mend together. The night stretched ahead, the desert vast, but the threat of the outlaws grew. Elias taught Kaya to use his lasso, her hands steady despite her past, their partnership a lifeline. Tala showed him Apache desert signs, their trust a flame against the desert's grip. You're strong, Elias said. Kaya smiled, a rare light in her eyes. You too, brother. The tribe watched, their kinship deepening, a family forged in the crucible of the desert. But the peace was fleeting. Hoofbeats returned, closer now Vance and his men, relentless as the sun. Elias chose a defensible ridge, setting up with the tribe behind rocks. We fight if we must, he said, his rifle ready. Tala nodded, his spear poised. Vance's men appeared, their rifles glinting. Last chance, Reed, Vance shouted. Elias fired, his shot dropping a rider, but an arrow grazed Tala's leg, drawing a cry. Kaya shielded him, her pouch a talisman, while Kono's spear felled 2, forcing the attackers to retreat. They bandaged Tala's leg, Elias's hands gentle. You're all my family now, he said. Tala's eyes met his, a warmth breaking through. And you're ours. The desert tested them, its trials forging a bond, but the outlaws' wrath loomed larger, a storm they'd face together. Sunken Pass was near, but so was their reckoning. The Arizona desert sprawled like an unyielding crucible of red sand, its surface baking under the relentless glare of a midday sun that transformed the air into a shimmering haze of heat and dust, the horizon wavering with mirages of desperation. Elias Reed, Kaya, Liko, and the Apache kin led by Tala pressed onward, the wagon creaking behind Elias's steady hands, the weary horse plodding through the shifting dunes with a labored gait, its breath a faint whisper in the stifling air. Elias's worn coat clung to his broad frame with sweat, his boots sinking into the parched earth, his lasso coiled at his hip, his rifle slung across his back. His face, rugged with a scar along his jaw, bore a determined set, his gray eyes scanning the horizon for signs of the outlaws, a quiet resolve battling the weight of his past solitude. Kaya walked beside him, her torn deerskin dress fluttering beneath a borrowed blanket, her ankles still bandaged from the river, her small woven pouch with tribal secrets swaying at her side, her brown eyes sharp with survival. Liko, the 2-year-old boy, clung to her, his tattered rag doll pressed against his chest, his pale face showing signs of recovery. Tala followed, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his hands carrying a spear, his presence a silent guardian, flanked by 3 Apache warriors, their faces painted with earth tones, their horses laden with supplies glinting in the fading light. The hidden tribal refuge near Sunken Pass, their destination, was a day's journey, but the desert held other trials to forge their resilience. Their water was nearly gone, the canteen they'd salvaged from desert crossing reduced to a few tepid drops, their supplies dwindled to a strip of jerky and a handful of desert figs Tala had foraged. The heat beat down, its intensity a relentless adversary, the silence broken only by the rasp of their breathing, the soft whimper of Liko, and the distant call of a vulture circling overhead. Elias's mind wrestled with his past, his wife and daughter's death to fever, his years of isolation, a guilt that shadowed his every step. The presence of Kaya and Liko, a mirror to his loneliness, stirred a compassion he'd buried, their resilience, a challenge to his despair. "We need to find water soon," Elias said, his voice hoarse from the dry air. Tala nodded, pointing to a faint shadow on the desert floor. "There's a dry wash ahead. It might hold a spring," he replied, his Apache wisdom guiding them through the wasteland. The tribe's silence, broken only by soft murmurs and the occasional clink of supplies, hinted at their vigilance. The pouch Kaya carried a burden they shared. They reached the dry wash as the sun peaked, its shade a fleeting mercy against the scorching heat. Elias checked the wagon, its wheels wobbling from the rough terrain, while Kaya and a warrior named Kono scouted for signs of life, her movements aided by the wheelchair he'd improvised. The wash offered a shallow pool, its water brackish but drinkable, a rare oasis in the desert's grip. Elias filled the canteen, offering it to Kono first, his hands trembling from the heat. "Drink, friend," he said, the word warm with care. Kono accepted, his eyes softening. "Thank you, Elias," he murmured, a rare nod breaking through his stoic demeanor. The moment was brief, but it deepened their bond, a thread of trust weaving through their shared struggle. The desert's ordeal struck at noon. A sandstorm brewed on the horizon, a roiling wall of red dust that swallowed the sky, its roar a test of their endurance. "Get down," Elias shouted, pulling Kaya, Liko, and the wagon behind a boulder, the warriors and horse crowding in. The storm hit like a living entity, its force tearing at their clothes, dust clogging their throats and stinging their eyes. Elias shielded Liko with his body, Kaya and the warriors huddling close, the tempest raging for hours, leaving them buried in drifts, their water spilled into the sand. As it passed, the desert revealed a new peril, an outlaw trap, a snare concealed by sand, its metal jaws glinting near Kaya's wheelchair. Elias reacted instantly, yanking her back, the trap snapping shut inches from her. Tala's quick thinking with his spear dislodged the mechanism, saving them. "Good save," Elias said, his respect for them growing. Kaya nodded, her gaze steady. "The desert tests our soul," she replied. That night they camped in the wash's lee, a small fire their only warmth, its glow casting shadows on the sandy walls. The storm had delayed them, the refuge still a day away, and Elias's mind churned with guilt, his family's loss, his years of isolation, now this family's fight. Kono offered him a fig, his hands gentle. "You fight for us," he said. "Why?" Elias poked the fire, his face shadowed. "I turned away from help once my wife and girl paid for it. Can't do that again." Liko's eyes, though weak, softened, his small voice whispering, "Papa?" A word that pierced Elias's heart. The confession hung heavy, a mirror to Elias's regrets. "Strength ain't just in surviving," he said. "It's in standing together." Kaya leaned against him, her voice small. This pouch holds our rights. They want them to profit. Elias's heart ached, his losses echoing hers. I lost my family to fever. Lived alone since. Tala's gaze met his, a warmth breaking through. We're all lost then. Maybe we find kin. Their talk was interrupted by a rustle. Apache figures emerged from the dusk, led by a stout woman with a painted face. I am Nita, Tala's sister, she said, her voice cautious. We saw the storm. Outlaws hunt you. She offered a water skin, her eyes on Kaya and Liko. You're alive, sister. We thought you lost. Kaya ran to her, tears in her eyes. Elias saved us. Nita nodded, offering Elias a feathered cord. Your kin now, Cowboy. The reunion was brief but heartfelt. Nita's warriors, 15 strong, joined them, their spears glinting. The tracker Vance is near, Nita warned. He plans an attack at dawn. Elias's heart steadied, his bond with the tribe a shield. We'll be ready, he said. Liko's hand found his trust a beacon. Father, he murmured. The word warmed Elias, a redemption he hadn't sought. The peace shattered as the first light crept over the horizon. Hoofbeats echoed Vance and 12 riders, their rifles ready, their intent clear in the pre-dawn gloom. Nita's men melted into the sand dunes, leaving Elias and the tribe exposed on the ridge. Hold, Nita whispered, but Elias stood firm, his rifle raised, the weight of the warning settling in. Vance's voice cut through the heat. Give up the woman, Reed, or die. Elias fired, his shot grazing a rider, but an arrow struck Nita's shoulder, drawing a cry. Kaya shielded her, her pouch a talisman, while Tala's spear felled too, forcing Vance to retreat momentarily. They bandaged Nita's shoulder, Elias's hands gentle. You're all my family now, he said. Nita's eyes met his, a warmth breaking through. And you're ours. The desert tested them, its trials forging a bond, but the outlaws' attack loomed larger, a storm they'd face together. Sunken Pass was near, but so was their reckoning. Sunken Pass rose like a jagged scar across the Arizona desert, its treacherous canyon of red sandstone and weathered outcrops, standing defiant against the encroaching dusk. The sun dipped low, casting a fiery glow across the pass's rim, the air thick with the scent of sun-scorched earth and the faint promise of a cooling night breeze following the day's relentless heat. Elias Reed, Kaya, Liko, and the Apache kin led by Tala prepared for their stand, the tension palpable in the stillness, heightened by the looming threat of the outlaws' attack. Elias's worn coat was torn at the sleeve, his boots caked with dust and blood from his grazed leg, his lasso coiled at his hip, his rifle steady despite the ache in his muscles. His face, rugged with a scar along his jaw, bore a grim determination, his gray eyes shadowed by the weight of his past solitude. Kaya stood beside him, her torn deerskin dress fluttering beneath a borrowed blanket, her arm wound bandaged, her small woven pouch with tribal secrets clutched tightly, her brown eyes resolute with survival. Liko, the 2-year-old boy, clung to her, his tattered rag doll pressed against his chest, his pale face showing signs of strength. Tala followed, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his leg wound bandaged, his hands wielding a spear, his presence a steady guardian, flanked by 3 Apache warriors, their faces painted with earth tones, their weapons and horses poised for battle. The journey to this refuge had forged their bond, now tested by the outlaws' relentless pursuit. The pass offered strategic ground-steep drops for ambushes, rocky outcrops for cover, and a narrow pass for traps. Elias fortified a vantage point with Tala's men, his hands calloused from years of ranching, now skilled in war. Kaya rigged tripwires with sinew, her movements precise despite her exhaustion, her pouch a constant reminder of their burden. The warriors assisted, stacking stones with kono, their vigilance unwavering. The outlaws want the pouch, Tala said, his voice low and strained. They'll kill us for it. Elias nodded, his guilt over past isolation fueling his resolve. We hold them here, he replied. Kono handed him a sharpened stake, a silent pledge of unity, the weapon's weight a comfort in his hands. Nita distributed spears and arrows, her warriors blending into the pass's shadows, their movements silent and deadly. Vance leads them, she warned. The attack is near. Elias's heart steadied, his bond with the tribe a shield against the encroaching dark. We fight as family, he said. Liko's small hand found his, a flicker of trust breaking through his fear. Father, he murmured, a word that warmed Elias's soul. The sentiment lingered, a redemption he hadn't dared hope for. As the wind carried the distant sound of approaching hooves, the conflict now a reality. As dusk deepened, the air grew taut with anticipation, the pass's silence broken by the crunch of boots on gravel. The outlaws rode in with 15 men, Vance at their side, the tracker's scar-faced grin a harbinger of violence. Their leader, a broad man in a black duster lined with stolen pelts, dismounted and called out, his voice a thunderclap against the cliffs. "Reed, hand over the woman and that pouch, or this pass becomes your grave." Elias stepped forward, his rifle raised, his voice firm despite the heat. "You'll have to take them over my dead body," he shouted, his breath visible in the cooling air. The clash erupted like a desert tempest. The outlaws charged, their rifles and revolvers spitting fire through the dusk. Elias's first shot dropped a rider, the bullet finding its mark with a precision honed by defiance. Tala's warriors struck from the shadows, their spears felling 2 more, their movements silent and deadly. Kaya triggered a tripwire, a dynamite cache salvaged from an old settler's stash exploding and sending a shower of sand and rock, scattering the attackers. But the outlaws' numbers were overwhelming, and Vance's rifle was a relentless predator, his bullet grazing Elias's arm, drawing a sharp hiss of pain. Nita pulled him behind a boulder, her leg wound seeping anew. "Stay alive," she growled, loosing an arrow that struck a man's chest, her aim unwavering despite her fatigue. The pass became a battlefield, its echoes ringing with gunfire and the thud of falling bodies. Elias fired again, dropping another rider, the heat numbing his hands but not his resolve. Tala's warriors fought with primal fury, their spears piercing the fray, while Kono and the warriors lobbed rocks, their forms a surprising force against the rocky terrain. But the outlaw leader's voice cut through the chaos. "Kaya, give me the pouch's secret, or they all die." He held a pistol to Tala's head, the warrior's spear shattered, his eyes defiant. Kaya's heart sank, her pouch clutched tight. "No!" she cried, her voice raw with emotion. Elias's mind raced. He couldn't lose another family. He signaled Tala's men to hold, his gaze locking with Kaya's, a silent plea for a plan. Kaya stepped forward, her stance defiant despite her wounds. "They betrayed my tribe," she shouted, her voice carrying over the wind. "They sold our people to traders for gold, left us to die when we resisted." The revelation hit Elias like a thunderclap. The outlaw's greed wasn't just for the pouch, but for the sacred rights it guarded, a secret her tribe had protected. The leader laughed, his pistol steady. "Then you all die with your rebellion." But Kaya moved, shoving Elias and Liko aside as Vance fired, the bullet tearing through her chest. She fell, blood pooling in the dust, her pouch slipping from her grasp. "Elias, no!" he roared, lunging to Kaya's side, his hands trembling as he pressed against the wound. Tala's warriors charged, their spears a blur, felling 3 men in a surge of vengeance. Kono struck with a rock, stunning a rider, while Nita's arrow found another's leg. Elias tackled Vance, their struggle a tangle of fists and sand, until his lasso tightened around the tracker's neck, ending the threat. The outlaw leader roared, charging with his pistol, but Tala's spear pierced his side, bringing him down. The remaining outlaws fled, their horses vanishing into the dusk. Elias knelt beside Kaya, his hands stained with her blood, his heart breaking as he tried to stem the flow. "Hold on," he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. Her eyes met his, a faint smile breaking through the pain. "You're my brother now," she rasped. "Protect him. The pouch is our future." Her hand fell, her spirit slipping into the desert's embrace, her sacrifice a final act of trust. Nita bound the leader, her men finishing the fight, the pass falling silent save for the wind's mournful wail. The outlaws were defeated, their men scattered, but Kaya's loss was a wound deeper than the heat. Elias cradled her, tears mixing with the dust on his face, the weight of her words sinking in. Liko, Tala, and the warriors approached, placing the pouch, a woven mat, and herbs on her chest. "She was our mother," Liko said, his small voice thick. "Now she's with our ancestors." The Apache carried her to a pyre, their chants rising, a tribute to her courage that echoed through the pass. Elias stood, his guilt eased by her forgiveness, his promise to protect Liko a new purpose. The pass smoldered, the air heavy with loss and victory. Nita offered Elias a place with the tribe, and he nodded. "I'll honor her at the refuge," he said, his voice steady. The journey to Sunken Pass had broken the outlaw's grip, But Kaya's sacrifice would resonate in the desert's silence. Elias's redemption was hers, and the pouch her people's legacy would remain guarded. The dawn broke over Sunken Pass, a fragile light spilling across the red sands, where the embers of Kaya's pyre glowed like the last whispers of a fading hope. The air was thick with the lingering scent of smoke and the dry, earthy aroma of the desert, the vast Arizona wilderness reclaiming the battlefield with a quiet, unyielding peace. Elias Reed stood at the pass's edge, his worn coat torn and dusted with ash, his boots planted firmly in the sand, his lasso and rifle resting against a boulder. His face, rugged with a scar along his jaw, bore the weight of grief, his gray eyes glistening with unshed tears, the guilt of his past solitude softened by Kaya's final words. The woven pouch with the tribal secrets, Kaya's strange reward, hung around his neck on a cord, a symbol of the kinship that had brought him to this moment. The outlaw leader, bound and defeated, slumped against a rock, his claim to power shattered, his greed no match for the courage of a cowboy and his adopted tribe. Liko, the 2-year-old boy, clung to Elias's leg, his tattered rag doll pressed against his chest, his pale face reflecting a mix of sorrow and newfound strength. Tala, Nita, Kono, and the Apache warriors stood nearby, their painted faces etched with both loss and pride, the hope of their legacy burning bright. The Apache warriors, led by Tala, moved with a solemn reverence, their faces mirroring the pass's rugged hues as they gathered around Kaya's pyre. The flames had dwindled to a gentle glow, the sand around it darkened by melted wax and ash, a testament to her sacrifice. Tala knelt, offering a prayer in Apache, his voice a deep chant that reverberated through the cliffs, honoring a mother who had transcended her role as protector and sister. Elias watched, his hands trembling as he placed Kaya's blanket once her shield onto the pyre, a silent vow to carry her legacy forward. Liko, Nita, and the warriors joined him, adding the pouch, a woven mat, and a bundle of herbs, their offerings a tribute to her courage. "She saved us," Liko said, his small voice thick with emotion. "You kept her promise." Elias nodded, the words a balm to his wounded soul, a redemption he hadn't dared to claim. The journey to the hidden tribal refuge began, the warriors carrying the pyre's remnants through the pass's rocky trail, its ashes, a sacred burden. The path was treacherous, the sand shifting underfoot, the heat of the day giving way to a cooling breeze that carried the promise of renewal. Elias walked with them, his leg aching from the graze but his spirit lifted by their unity. The refuge emerged a sheltered valley, nestled between towering mesas, its floor dotted with mesquite, and a faint shimmer of a spring fed by an underground stream. The Apache survivors greeted them, their faces etched with grief for Kaya but warmth for her savior. Nita led Elias to the spring, its waters clear and life-giving, reflecting the cavern walls adorned with painted symbols and woven mats, a sanctuary Kaya had died to protect. "Her spirit guards this place," Nita said. "You are kin." The tribe gathered around a fire that night, the valley's walls amplifying their voices as they shared tales of Kaya's bravery. Her gifts to Elias, her trust, the pouch were now symbols of her legacy, their weight heavier than the sacred rights they held. They offered him a place among them, their eyes reflecting gratitude and hope. "You fought for her," Kono said, handing him a woven mat. "Stay, and find peace." Elias hesitated, his mind drifting to his past, a cowboy broken by fever and loss, his wife and daughter's deaths a guilt he'd carried like a stone. Kaya's words, "You're my brother," echoed, her sacrifice a key to unlock that prison. "I'll stay," he said finally, "but I'll bring my skills to your valley. With your help." The days that followed were a blend of mourning and rebuilding. The Apache taught Elias their ways, how to channel the spring's water for crops, how to weave mats from desert grasses, how to honor their rights with herbs by the fire. Liko became his shadow, the boy's small hands learning alongside Elias's, his laughter a rare sound that softened the edges of his grief. They constructed a small adobe home near the spring, its walls rising under their hands, a fusion of Apache resilience and Elias's ranching skills. The desert, once a place of solitude, became a bridge between worlds, its silence broken by the tribe's songs and the trickle of water, a stark contrast to the hollow quiet he'd known. One evening, as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of orange and purple, Elias stood at the spring's edge, the woven pouch, a constant reminder. Liko and the tribal children joined him, holding a new pouch and a carved lasso crafted by the tribe. "For us?" Liko asked. Elias nodded, his eyes misting as he handed them out. Your mother would want you to have them, he said. Liko smiled, a rare light in his young face. She gave us a home, the sentiment lingered, a bond forged in the crucible of the desert, strengthened by the promise of a chosen family. The tribe celebrated with a feast, their songs filling the valley, Kaya's name woven into the melodies. Elias learned her story in full, how she'd fled her tribe's rejection to protect Liko, how she'd hidden the pouch to save their secrets, how her spirit now watched over them. His past, his failure to save his family, his years of isolation faded against her forgiveness. He wasn't just a cowboy anymore, but a guardian, a father to those he'd once failed. Nita approached, offering a carved wooden flute. Lead with her strength, she said. Elias took it, his hand steady. I will. Weeks later, the valley thrived, its spring nourishing new crops, its people strengthened by Elias's aid. The tribe, true to their bond, began the journey back to Silent Canyon, bringing materials and hands to rebuild Elias's ranch, transforming the ruins into a symbol of renewal. He rebuilt his life, the tribe's help a lifeline, their stories a balm to his loneliness. Kaya's blanket hung above the new home's door, a shrine to her sacrifice, its fabric a silent witness. The desert stretched vast, its red sands a testament to their fight, but it was no longer a place of solitude. Elias's redemption was complete, not in land, but in the family he'd found: Liko, Tala, Nita, Kono, the tribe all bound by Kaya's legacy. As the sun rose over Sunken Pass, its golden light bathed the valley and the distant silhouette of the reborn ranch, a promise of a new beginning. Elias stood at the home's threshold, the wooden flute at his side, the woven pouch gleaming. He was no longer just a cowboy who'd offered rescue, but a father to a boy whose mother's courage had saved him, whose pouch had turned peril into a legacy of hope. The desert whispered her name, and Elias carried it forward, a chosen family born from the ashes of sacrifice, with the promise of a rebuilt home anchoring their sacred bond.